To turn to the book of John, chapter 11. John, chapter 11, very familiar chapter. It's a wide-ranging chapter. There's many things we could focus upon. In this chapter, we see the natural course of life, such as sickness, death, and the grave. As you read the chapter, there's that which is very grim and hopeless. There's sadness, there's heartache, there's mourning. There's also comfort and assurance and peace and victory. Also in this chapter, we have unveiled the person of Jesus Christ, the love of Christ, the tenderness of Christ, the miraculous power of the Lord. As you look at this 11th chapter, it is one of the greatest hopeless cases in all the Word of God. And what is brought before us is the fact that hope is restored to the tired and weary soul. We could preach a very lengthy series upon John chapter 11. It's just filled with spiritual truth, invaluable instruction, much encouragement. There's much there for our spiritual nourishment. We want to read today, beginning with verse 17, and we'll read down through verse 32. Then when Jesus came, he found that he, that is Lazarus, had lain in the grave 4 days already. There's a lot of spiritual truth right there, those 4 days. But we're not going to get into that. Just think of why Christ was raised in 3 days, and Lazarus is in the grave now 4 days. Now Bethany was nigh unto Jerusalem, about 15 furlongs off, 1.5 miles, 1.75 miles. And many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Very good practice. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. But Mary sat still in the house. Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. Jesus saith unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. Martha said unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life, and he that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Then he asks her a question. Believest thou this? She saith unto him, Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. And when she had so said, she went her way, and called Mary her sister secretly, saying, The Master is come, and calleth for thee. As soon as she heard that is, the Master is come and calleth for thee, she arose quickly and came unto him. Now Jesus was not yet come into town, but was in that place where Martha met him. The Jews then, which were with her in the house, and comforted her, when they saw Mary, that she rose up hastily and went out, followed her, saying, they've made an assumption, she goeth unto the grave to weep there. Then when Mary was come where Jesus was, and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying unto him, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. So in these verses, we have the arrival of Jesus. We see in verse 17, Jesus came. He has arrived upon a scene of anguish, hurt, and sorrow. We also have the desperateness of the situation expressed. Notice in verse 22 what Martha said to Christ, but I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. I know that even now. So what we have, it's upon these two, the arrival of Jesus, and then we have the desperateness of the situation, described in those two words, even now, even now, even now. And it's upon those two things that we want to center our thoughts, the arrival of Jesus, the desperateness of the situation. Again, verse 17, Jesus came. Verse 22, even now. So think of those two phrases. Jesus came, even now. Jesus came, even now. Here Martha say to Jesus, I know that even now, that expresses something extreme, that expresses something drastic, something serious, something desperate, something dire, even now. And this is followed by, notice there in verse 22, I know that even now, and then it's followed by thou and thee. So where's her focus? She's in an even now situation. And where's her focus? Christ, thou and thee. He was her focus. So our subject this morning is Jesus in our even now. So let's consider first of all the events leading up to this even now, and it really, as you look at the events leading up to the even now, it explains the situation. There was sickness. The chapter opens with sickness. We read, now a certain man was sick. This man that was sick, his name is Lazarus. We read, a certain man was sick named Lazarus. This man lived in Bethany. Again, it says, now a certain man was sick named Lazarus of Bethany. This man was also the brother of Martha and Mary. And we see that in verse 2, whose brother, Lazarus, was sick. This is a family that is identified with Christ. This is a family that possessed a reverence for Christ. This is a family that had a closeness to Christ. And again, now a certain man was sick, named Lazarus. Now this was a very real sickness. The Lord wants us to understand that Lazarus was sick, because it's repeated in verse 2, where we read those final words of that verse, Lazarus was sick. And in verse 3, Martha and Mary said, he is sick. Jesus referred to it in verse 4, this sickness. And again we read in verse 6, he was sick. 5 times in the first 6 verses, it is declared that this man was sick. So I think we can believe that he was sick. Lazarus had been healthy, but now he's sick. So sick that he died. So the sickness, this isn't just a cold. The sickness was a time of trial. It was a time of difficulty, time of hardship. It was an interruption to his normal everyday life. That's the worst thing about being sick, at least in my mind. It's an interruption to life. It was also an interruption in the lives of Martha and Mary. Now, during this sickness, Lazarus suffered physically, perhaps mentally, perhaps emotionally. Martha and Mary no doubt experienced some sorrow, some heartache. Mary and Martha did not suffer in the exact same way. They were 2 different people. They don't suffer in the exact same way. Nor did they suffer as their brother suffered. They suffered in a different way than Lazarus. Perhaps Martha and Mary and perhaps Lazarus suffered in one area where another did not necessarily suffer to the same degree. So there was a variety of things in this sickness. So there's sickness. There's also death. We read in verse 3 that Martha and Mary sent word to Jesus that Lazarus was sick. And we read in verse 6 that Jesus abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. During that time, those 2 days, Lazarus died. And in verse 14, Jesus told the apostles, Lazarus is dead. He said, Lazarus sleepeth. They thought he was taking a nap. And so Jesus got more plain and he said, Lazarus is dead. So Martha and Mary, no doubt, suffered sorrow, tremendous heartache as their brother died. When a loved one is dying, there is always a sense of helplessness, which becomes a trial in itself. So Martha and Mary, though they had some of the same emotions, they did not suffer in exactly the same manner. But they both experienced the death of their brother and the death of a loved one always brings an aspect of suffering. Don't get so spiritual that you pretend that there's no suffering or no hurt at all. Because there is. There is a suffering when a loved one dies. So we have sickness, we have death. There was a funeral. Martha and Mary, after they experienced the sorrow and the pain, the heartache, the helplessness of their brother dying, they next had the sorrow of burying their brother. Again, you can watch a loved one take his or her last breath, and there is a suffering that takes place there. Then you have a funeral. That's a different kind of suffering now. It's a different thing. There's many different aspects to this suffering. Again, we're leading up to even now. And though Martha and Mary no doubt experienced some of the same emotions during their brother's funeral, again, I don't believe they suffered exactly in the same manner. Don't make the mistake. You experience the death of a loved one, you go through the funeral and all of that, so you assume that you have suffered exactly the same way that someone else is now suffering that's going through it. That's so far from true. Because we're all different. Just mark it down, there's been suffering. It doesn't matter the degree or the aspect. The funeral of a loved one brings an aspect of suffering. So we have sickness, we have death, we have the funeral. All brought suffering. There was also a trial after the funeral. After they buried their brother, that was not the end of their suffering and trial. I always try to remind families at gravesides, or people at the graveside, that the family has experienced a loss. Their trial, their loss has not ended when we end the service here, because a lot of people think that. No, that could be the hardest part yet. Now it's after the funeral. They return to their home. Why? Because life has to go on. You can't stop living. Life has to go on. But it's not the same. I've told people many times there's a different normal. There's a different normal now. And as Martha and Mary have returned home, they are experiencing the trial of it all. And from verse 17, we learn that it has now been 4 days since the burial of Lazarus. Following the funeral, in verse 19, there was a gathering of friends and perhaps other family members at the house of Martha and Mary. Their purpose was to comfort them. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. We should be able to find a degree of comfort in family and friends. But as you look at that house, it's a scene of sorrow. It's a scene of grief and heaviness and hurt. Now, while they're in that house, Jesus arrives in Bethany. Notice verse 17. Jesus came. Jesus came. He came with the purpose of doing the miraculous. He came with the purpose of doing what no one else could do. Jesus came. Those are difference-making words. Jesus came. He is there as the one who loved them. Verse 5 says, Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And Jesus came. He is there as their loving friend. Jesus came. He's there as the all-knowing one. Now they told Jesus of the sickness. Jesus knew it already anyway. No one told him of the death. Jesus knew. And Jesus came as the all-knowing one. Jesus came as the one who possessed everything that they needed. Martha and Mary were in great need, and Jesus came. He came in His infinity. He came in His vastness. He came in His immensity. He came in His fullness. He's there as the all-sufficient one. He is there as a hiding place from the wind, as a covert from the tempest, as rivers of water in a dry place, and as a shadow of a great rock in a weary land. He is there as the one who has brought more comfort, more cheer, more hope than any other has ever brought. He is there as the one who has altered and reshaped the course of life for multitudes. He's there as the one who has brought drastic and lasting change, miraculous change, to the lives of men and women. And He came. And He's there. And He's able. He's able to bring light. He's able to bring refreshment. He's able to bring mending. He's able to bring healing and strength and rest and joy and courage and victory. There are all those gathered in the house. They're there to comfort. And we're not meaning to downplay their comfort, but their comfort's not the same as Jesus. In fact, a lot of times, people in their attempt to comfort add to the trial. Perhaps there was some of that going on as well. But Jesus came, and He's there as the approachable one. He's not there as unapproachable. Both Martha and Mary would come to Him. So that's everything leading up to our text. So let's look at the situation of Martha and Mary. Martha, in verse 20, then Martha, as soon as she heard, as soon as she heard. That means immediately. That's not 2 hours later. As soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met Him. She heard. Somehow she got word. Somehow word got to that house. Jesus is on His way. And as soon as she heard, she went and met Him. In time of trial, you need to meet Him. You need to meet Him. So now the scene shifts from the house to Martha before Jesus. And we see that in verses 21 through 27. Her very first words to Christ were the expression of an array of emotion. Verse 21, Lord, if Thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. Now that's quite a statement. It reveals many things. Lord, if Thou hadst been here, if You my brother had not died. Lord, if you, my brother had not died. So this statement from Martha, Mary made the statement as well in verse 32. It reveals several things that they both had experienced and were feeling. It had been a time of personal pain. Notice again, verse 21. And again, we see Mary makes the same statement. If thou hadst been here, my brother. Just stop on those two words. My brother. It's not, Lord, if thou hadst been here, Lazarus would not have died. Or it's not, Lord, if thou hadst been here, he would not have died. It is my brother. My brother. That makes it personal. It shows that there was personal pain. There was personal grief. There was personal heartache that they both felt. It had also been a time of loneliness. If thou hadst been here. If thou hadst been here. Again, when their brother was sick and dying, Jesus was not there in bodily presence. Martha and Mary had sent word to him concerning the sickness of Lazarus, verses 2 and 3. No doubt they expected Jesus to come. But instead of coming, he remained where he was. And no doubt they suffered from this statement. They suffered from the fact that they did not see his presence. No doubt Martha and Mary looked for him. They were looking for Jesus. They were expecting Jesus to come. We told him, Lazarus, our brother, is sick. And they have expectation of him coming. They looked for him as they ministered to their brother. And as they went through the sickness and the death and then the burial, they were looking for him. But they did not experience his presence like they had expected. Did not experience his bodily presence. So would not this be another aspect of their suffering? There was disappointment that Jesus had not come. It had also been a time of waiting. They were expecting the Lord. They waited for him, but he didn't come. Waiting can be agonizing. Waiting can be agonizing, and waiting can be a great trial to one's faith. This also could add another aspect to their suffering. It had been a time of personal loss. Again, the words, my brother died. If thou hadst been here, my brother had not died, but my brother died. There's a sense of loss. The death of a loved one brings loss. Again, well, we know they're in heaven, and we know all that. We know all that. But that does not lessen the loss of a life. There is a loss. People need to recognize when someone dies, someone has experienced a loss. Well, they shouldn't have any problem. They're in heaven. There's a loss. We need to realize that. It had also been a time of personal confusion and bewilderment. Again, hear those words. If thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. Is there not some confusion and bewilderment in that statement? Lord, why didn't you come? Jesus knew why he delayed his coming to them. Jesus always knows. But Martha and Mary didn't know. They didn't know, and they didn't understand the why. The hours just kept on passing. And they were hurting. And they did not understand, why has he not come? The fact that Jesus did not come when they called, the fact that he did not come when they expected him to, the fact that he did not do what they were hoping that he would do, filled their hearts and minds with why. A lot of people get stuck there. Why? Why did he get sick? Why did he die? Don't get stuck there. But obviously there was some of that going on. And that caused them to question in their minds his care. You get stuck long enough on why, you will begin to question the Lord. This adds to another, this is just another aspect of their suffering. So when they sent word to him concerning the sickness of their brother, could not he have sent word back to them, saying, Martha, Mary, I'm going to let him die. But after 4 days, I'm going to come and I'll do the miraculous and bring him back to life. He didn't say that. That's what he was going to do. The Lord doesn't tell us everything he's going to do. We just have to trust him. And since the Lord did not tell them, they didn't know. Don't pretend to know something that you don't. They didn't know. What Jesus said to the apostles, John 13:7, what I do, thou knowest not. Oh, that's very true. That is so very true. We don't know what the Lord's doing. We don't have to know. We just have to trust him. But in that statement, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother would not have died. There is confusion, there is bewilderment. And that just adds another aspect of their suffering. Martha went on to say to Jesus in verse 22, I know that even now, I know that even now. So there's Martha with a very heavy heart, and she is before Jesus. She says, I know, followed by thou, God, and thee. So there was an awareness in her mind of his character. There was also a degree of confidence and assurance and persuasion in him. And this was in her even now situation. I know that even now, in the even now situations of life, we need to possess a confidence and assurance and a persuasion in him. Even now. I know that even now. We must not view our even now situations apart from him. In those words, I know that even now is the conviction that nothing is impossible with him. In the even now situations of life, we need to know that He is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we ask or think. Whatever the even now might be, it might be a time of darkness, it might be a time of great need, it might be a time of great thirst, brokenness, weakness, weariness, on and on we can go. We need to rejoice in this, that Jesus comes into our even now situations. So Jesus, in this even now situation, speaks words of assurance to Martha. Notice verse 23. Jesus saith unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. That was a word of assurance. Verse 24, Martha declares her theological knowledge. Martha said unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. It's good to have theological knowledge, but I want to tell you something. In an even now situation, you need more than theological knowledge. Notice in response what Jesus says. Jesus said unto her, I am. What's He doing? She's given her theological, she's declared her theological knowledge. And what does Jesus do? He draws attention to Himself. That's what we need. The theological knowledge is not what's going to get you through the even now situation. What's going to get you through is realizing who He is. That's why He directs her attention to Himself. Jesus said unto her, I am. That is right now. In this even now situation, I am the resurrection and the life. What's He saying? Lazarus is dead. He's in a grave. And what He says is, I'm exactly what is needed for this situation. I am the resurrection. He didn't say there, I am the bread of life, though He is. He said, I am the resurrection and life. He is telling her, I am exactly what you need in this circumstance. He always is. In our even now situations, we need more than theological knowledge. We need Him. We need Him. I've seen it happen many times. People are heartbroken, and they feel that they've got to be extra spiritual. Nothing wrong with being spiritual, so they give you a theological discourse when you ask them a question in their sorrow. What they need is not theology. What they need is Him. Even now, I am. I am. In verse 26, Jesus makes application to Martha regarding who He is. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. That's just a statement. But then He makes application. Martha, do you believe this? Martha, do you believe this? What we need to embrace in the distresses of life is who and what Jesus is. Verse 27, Martha affirms her faith. She said unto Him, Yea, Lord. Yes, Lord. Best two words you can say. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Oh, that we would learn those two words. She says, Yea, Lord, I believe. What did she believe? What she believed had to do with Christ. I believe thou art the Christ, the Son of God. She says, I believe who you are. Notice also which should come into the world. She believed that he was the promised one in this book. The scene closes, verse 28. She went her way. Notice those words. And when she had so said, she went her way. I want to tell you something. She leaves completely different than when she came. She came saying, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. Before she went away, she said, Lord, I believe. She went away different than when she came. I believe she goes away with the peace of God overflowing in her heart. She heads back to that house. She returns to the house where her sister Mary was. Mary's there, still feeling a heaviness in her heart, still with sorrow, still with grief, still hurting. And from what follows, it's obvious that during the conversation between Christ and Martha, Jesus said to Martha, go and tell Mary to come. Martha, go and tell your sister to come. Martha, go and tell Mary that I'm waiting here for her. Notice verse 28. And when she had so said, she went her way and called Mary her sister secretly, saying, the Master is come and calleth for thee. So obviously, Jesus had said to Martha, you tell Mary to come. You tell Mary that I am waiting. The Master is come. There's a message in that. Mary didn't say, which master? I have several. She had one, the Lord. When Martha said, the Master, Mary knew who was calling. Now you say that to a lot of people today, the Master has come, and they say, my boss? My wife? My husband? Whatever. No, we ought to know what that means. The Master has come. As Martha entered that house, Mary could see that she has an abundance of peace within her. And it says that Martha called her sister secretly. Mary, Mary, come here, come here. And they got off, and Martha said to Mary, the Master's come. And he wants to meet with you. The Master is come. She's saying, Mary, the one who's greater than all the concerns and burdens and needs of the hour, he's come. He's come. She's saying, our God, the promised one, is come. Mary, the one who has the life and rejuvenation that you need in this hour, he's come. And he's calling for thee. And calleth for thee. So what she's saying is, Mary, he's not only come, he's come for you. He calleth for thee. He's come for you. How wonderful it is when the Lord shows up just for you. He's come for you. What does that mean? Mary, He's interested in you. The Master has come, and He's interested in you. The Master has come, and Mary, He wants to see you. He wants to speak to you. He wants to do for you. Oh, what wonderful words. And calleth for thee. So here we are in this even now situation. And Jesus is inviting His people to Himself. That's what He always does. We read in verse 29, as soon, there it is again, as soon as she heard that. Heard what? The Master is come, and calleth for thee. She arose quickly, and came unto Him. We need to hear Him. We need to respond in this way. As soon as she heard that, she arose quickly. As Mary leaves that house, what's on her mind? Only one thing. I've got to get to where Jesus is. I've got to get to where Jesus is. And in our even now situations, you need to be where He is. That's true in all situations. In verse 30, Jesus knows that Mary is coming, and He's waiting for her. Now, Jesus was not yet come into the town, but was in that place where Martha met Him. Just waiting. Just waiting for Mary. Verse 31, the others that were in the house, when they see Mary arise and head out, they assume that she's going to the grave of her brother to mourn. So they follow her, hoping to be able to comfort her. In verse 32, when Mary was come where Jesus was. So Mary arrives where Jesus is. And notice what it says. Verse 32, and saw Him. And saw Him. She's in the very presence of Him. And as a result, she saw Him. That's what we need to see. Him. Then notice what it says. She fell down at His feet. We don't read that of Martha. Martha may have fallen down at His feet. I don't know. But it's not stated. It is stated here of Mary. And why do you think that is? Well, because she's been there before. Remember when Jesus came to their house? Where was Mary? At His feet. What was she doing there? She was worshiping Him. She was being taught by Him. So here's Mary. She comes to where Jesus is and she falls down at His feet. She's been there before. She's received from Him there before. So she falls at His feet. And then she expressed the same thing Martha did. Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. All the many, many lessons that we can learn. The Master is come. And hear this, and calleth for thee. And calleth for thee. What are you going to do with that? I'm not talking about salvation. I'm talking about everyday Christian living. The Master is come and calleth for thee. Is there a day when those words aren't true? I don't think so. Be like Mary. Arise. Be like Martha. Come to him. Fall at his feet. Pour out your heart to him. Well, no one understands my situation. Oh, there's one who does. And he's the one you need. He's the one who can get you through. The Master is come and calleth for thee. And you know what? He's not late. He's not late. When he's 4 days late, he's right on time. What that means is we might think he's late, but he's never late. He's always right on time. He hasn't lost touch. Oh, you may have to go through a few days where you don't feel his presence, but he hasn't lost touch. And he's not limited in his ableness. Jesus has come. Expect. This is something we all need to work on. Expect the miraculous. Expect the miraculous. So in our text, we see both Martha and Mary conversing with Christ in an even now situation. So when we find ourselves in an even now situation, what should we do? Converse with Christ. Converse with Christ. Oh, you can call everybody you know. Get in touch with everybody you know. But that won't get you through. Converse with the Lord. Communion with Christ must not be broken. Don't allow anything to break communion with Christ. Brother John, if you'd come and lead us